This is an important video for a couple of reasons. The first is I'd like to share my personal UFO sightings, encounters, for the purpose of both showing sort of the continuity with other sightings and also to open the discussion on what is probably one of the most fascinating and compelling topics in the world today. As most of you are aware, every major government on this planet has indicated that they have recordings, data, multiple sightings, highly credible witnesses who have witnessed UFOs, and that these UFOs have, in fact, engaged, interacted, communicated in various ways. And so this topic is all over the news these days. For those of us who have had an interest in it, some of these realities have been present and considered in our minds for me, for example, for most of my adult life. So I'd like to both share my personal encounters and also some of the ramifications, some of the implications around the position that we find ourselves in with this reality that we are, in fact, being visited by beings from other worlds. So while it's true that just because a lot of people experience something, it doesn't inherently make it real. One can surmise that if something is real, a lot of people are going to experience it. And so this is, if nothing else, good justification to examine these phenomena, and something that in the coming years, no doubt, both because of our own technological advancements and perhaps a higher degree of engagement from others, that this topic is going to continue to gain steam, and our understanding and the implications of it are going to grow. So let's start with my experiences. And I'm going to start with my adult experiences. I had one when I was a young child, age 5 or 6, and I indirectly experienced this, meaning another family member, 2 other family members actually within my house had an experience, and I sort of co-witnessed this. But I would rather start when I was an adult, and my recollection and clarity of the sighting was most clear. So I was already a college student in the field of psychology. I was getting my undergraduate degree in psychology and in education, and I was driving home. I lived out in the country. This was in Florida. I lived in Lake Butler, Florida at the time. And I'm driving home, and there is a long stretch of winding road, a single road that took me approximately 20 miles from the boundary of Gainesville into Lake Butler. And I'm, kind of 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and the sun is out. It's a clear day. I'm not expecting to see anything. I'm listening to some good music. Driving, just beginning the journey. I'm driving probably 45, 50 miles an hour, kind of speeding along. I think the speed limit was 35 as I was crossing over another major road. And I look up ahead and to my left on this tree-lined road, and I see this black triangular shape speeding towards me, directly towards the place that I might be, kind of intersection of where our two paths might cross was, my estimation, was probably an eighth of a mile ahead. So once I noticed it, I realized that there wasn't too much time to consider what it was. Immediately upon seeing it, I thought that it was a stealth fighter. And so I was naturally pretty curious about this because you don't usually see stealth fighters in an incredibly low position flying just over trees in a, kind of urban/rural environment as I'm making this drive home. So I begin to notice this object, and I begin to just sort of inherently slow down the car so I can keep my eyes on it. So it's slowly coming into view as I pull over. And as I pull over, I notice inherently that my questioning of it as being a stealth fighter or a military plane or something like that completely disappeared from my mind. There was no question once I had slowed down enough that this object was not a plane. And even though I wasn't thinking this, it was because it had slowed down to a point that it would have fallen out of the air. I also, even though my windows were up in that initial slowing down period, the craft was completely silent. Whereas you would have expected it to, being at that point when I had first seen it, it was approximately, I'd say maybe a mile away. And by the time I slowed down, it was 3,000 feet away. So I eventually completely stopped my car, pulled over onto the side of the road, and rolled down my window. I was expecting still this thing to sort of roar over the intersection and somehow things be normalized. But that isn't what happened. I saw this black triangular craft, which was maybe 300 to 400 feet across. Perfect isosceles triangle with 3 lights on the bottom of it, gently swaying and hovering right above the tree line that would have crossed the road on my left-hand side. So this object is sort of undulating gently. Sometimes I would just see the tip of one of its tips sort of peek fully over the tree line, and I would see half the shape. At other times, it would sort of rise and shift gently above the tree line where I could see 2 of the 3 lights. I noticed immediately there was sort of a shift in my consciousness, and I knew that this craft knew that I was watching it. There was this connection of just knowingness, of mutuality. Very difficult thing, and was very startling to me because it felt very foreign. So it felt also very familiar. It was just a sense of knowing something and it knowing that you knew. As I watched this briefly, I realized whatever this was, it was not man-made. The first thought that sort of erupted into my consciousness was that this was nothing of this earth. And there were a number of expletives that also accompanied that. The surface was like an asphalt that had a purposeful texture. It wasn't definable, but it was highly absorptive of light and yet textured. I could tell that it wasn't some perfectly smooth metallic type of craft. And at that moment, once I started paying attention to the texture and my engagement, my critical thinking mind began to really engage, noticing the exact color of the white plasma-like lights, how they were recessed, how there was circular banding sort of around each of these, what I just knew was some sort of engine. It began to move. And so it shifted behind the tree line. At that point, I took maybe 1 second and realized it's going somewhere, and it's unlikely that it's going to be moving towards the city, towards the more populated area. So I kept my window down. I kept my eyes fixated on the exact spot that it was in, and I began driving very quickly, because around this band of trees, maybe 1.5 miles, 2 miles ahead, there was a bend in the road where I could get another perspective. So I began driving, looking, noticing if, it was behind me, if it was next to me, and I saw nothing. So I sort of took the chance at trying to intersect it ahead at this later point, just sort of intuitively knowing that it was on the move. So I raced ahead, and that drive took less than maybe 30 seconds. I punched it and was driving really quickly. And I got around the bend and could see this open field with this tree line road sort of also as part of my perspective. So it never crossed the road. And as I was looking down across this field, there was nothing there. It had completely vanished. So strangely, I just kept driving. I kept driving knowing that it wasn't where I had been. And I kept my eyes peeled, my head half out the window. And the end result was that I didn't see anything else. It had just simply vanished. Now, this left quite a impression on me. And for a number of weeks, I would have unusual experiences as I was falling asleep or waking up in the middle of the night or in the early morning hours. What was also remarkable is that event just sort of left my mind for quite a few years. I wasn't that I wasn't aware of it, I just didn't have much of an interest or focus on it, which in retrospect is very peculiar. It's also very peculiar that even to this day, it feels and seems not that unlike an ordinary experience. I know it's exceptional, and I know that the information the experience itself that I had is meaningful, and yet it just sort of is. It just happened. So this eventually, though, led this experience, and my impression of it eventually led some 15 years later to further discussions with a friend who I had been doing parapsychological research with. And this research centered more on haunting phenomena and poltergeist type phenomena and near-death experiences and out-of-body experiences and things of this nature, which I always ascribe to more earthly states of consciousness types of and psychological types of research. So it just so happened, though, that this person was also, so he was a good friend. His name is Jack, and he had been interested in UFOs for a number of years, even though we hadn't discussed the topic in depth. So we went to a UFO conference. He invited me in Sebring, Florida. And at this point, I'm probably in my 30s. And I arrive after maybe a 4-5 hour drive. So I'm a little bit tired. I go inside the conference and it's a little bit stuffy. I wanted to go outside into the cool night air, just spend a moment and talk to my friend. So he and I walk out of the back of this conference and we're talking, and he's facing me. And I kind of just look up at the night sky and I see about the size of a nickel or a quarter in the night sky, a black triangular craft with 3 lights that is very subtle. You might not immediately notice it against the emerging stars in the early night sky. So I immediately say, "Holy shit, Jack, look." And I'm pointing and he's looking and he doesn't see anything. So in that moment, I had such a confidence in the fact that I was seeing something. It was never a question of whether I was seeing it and it was real or not. It was whether or not whatever it was affecting his ability to see it, and or granting me some permission to be able to see it and not others. Right about the time these sorts of thoughts are entering my mind, he sees it and he's like, "Oh my God." So we're both sitting there pointing up at this UFO conference, and a number of other people begin to shuffle over and ask what it is we're pointing at and seeing, and because of the commotion we were making. In all, about 7 people came over and 5 people immediately saw it. The other 2 at that point, I'm not sure if they couldn't see it, didn't want to see it, or it had simply moved too far for them to see. In other words, it had sort of reduced in size. So this triangular object is passing through the sky, and 5 of us are witnessing it. And at some point, it simply begins to fade. So it had nothing to do with an atmospheric effect or its distance from us. You could see it just simply cloak, just simply begin to fade out, and it had just disappeared. So that was very fascinating to me because it was clear evidence to all of us that it had gotten into a state somehow where it had made itself essentially invisible to the naked eye. One of the people in the party had a night vision, military night vision camera, and we were all presuming that they were filming this whole thing, and we were all really excited about that. And so none of us bothered to take our eyes off the object, and I didn't even have a camera on me at that time. So we were hoping that the whole thing had been filmed, but it hadn't. So the person filming it, I think their battery was dead, or there was some issue with them filming it. But this was the second sighting that I had, and sort of holds a special place in my heart because it's one thing to witness something in perfect clarity and daylight at close proximity, and to know that it was an unmistakably real event, and to experience it with others in such a obvious sort of setting. So there are a couple of other sightings which I'm happy to share, but in order to keep this video at some reasonable length, I'll stop there. So I'd invite you to share any and all exceptional experiences that you've had. Maybe just keep them brief in the comments. Please feel free to ask me any questions about these specific encounters, and I will make future videos sharing some of the other sightings that I've had. And I look forward to continuing this discussion, while I also on my channel, of course, discuss some of the more practical, tangible self-work practices that we all need to engage in. So thank you.